What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2 underscores ANT. This show, of course, is sponsored by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms that you are listening to this podcast on. In tonight's episode of Disguised Coverage, we are going to dive into the Buffalo Bills 2023 rookie class from the perspective of their individual skill sets, the player evaluations, their fits within the scheme, the schematic structure of the Bills, whether offensively, defensively, their developmental timelines, and then use all of that to put together what their paths to the field and playing time look like by extension. I think that's, a lot of people are going to be doing draft breakdowns and grades and player analysis and all of those things, but all of it needs to be put into the perspective of what do these guys look like, not only for 2024 and beyond, but for 2023. This is a team that, whether accurately or inaccurately, has been branded by the Bills Mafia fan base as being a team that really hasn't played their rookies the last several years, and this past year especially. I disagree with a lot of that narrative, but when you look at this rookie class, it's an interesting one from a timeline perspective in terms of who is ready to contribute in 2023 and how much, who is ready to potentially contribute in more minor ways in 2023 and how much, and then what does 2024 look like, 2025, so on and so forth. That's what we're going to be diving into on tonight's show. So again, we're going to go through each one of the Buffalo Bills draft picks here in this 2023 draft class. I'm going to be breaking down their skill sets from my film study and tape evaluation from before the draft, after the draft, breaking it down with some advanced metrics, putting it all together as we do here on the show, where we marry and merge film plus advanced metrics. As we start to dive in to the first couple topics, I see a bunch of you folks jumping into the chat, which is always appreciated. If you would be so kind while you are here, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. And as we start to go through each one of the Bills draft picks here in this episode, I want to hear your thoughts if you are riding with me live here on this episode, or if you're not riding with me live, that's cool. If you are watching on YouTube post live, feel free to leave your comments. As always, I always circle back to the video for several days after to answer any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, put anything back in terms of responses for anything that goes out on the YouTube page. Or again, get at me on Twitter with any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns. Again, the Twitter handle at pro2_ANT. But yeah, as we motor on through here, you folks know I love the engagement on the show. So anything you got, throw it up into the chat. Likes, dislikes, worries, concerns, doubts, causes for excitement. Who or what are you excited about, worried about, anything and everything, whatever's on your mind, throw it up into the chat as we go along, player specific or not. As always, anything that is super chat related, I will automatically bring up. One, because I respect the monetary donation. Two, the color attracts my eyes and pulls me away from my notes. But beside that, I try to pull up anything and everything that I physically and or possibly can. Thank you again to everybody joining me live on this episode. Please drop a like. If you're not joining me live, that's cool. Appreciate your post live view, download, listen, whatever you got. I like where Roy's head is already at. He says, I'm here to check out the tree. I appreciate that very much. The tree is still in its draft splendor, little silver and gold action, very celebratory. I'll probably change it next week, get into some more May themed tree action, but we're still rocking the draft theme. Like where Sophia's head is at. She says, been looking forward to this since the draft ended. Rock on it. I appreciate you, Sophia. Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much for your extremely kind comment on one of the videos that Greg and I did for the instant reaction or analysis. I don't know if it was day 3 or day 2, but you left a very kind and seemingly sincere message. So Greg and I both appreciated how kind you were in that message. So thank you very much for that. All right. I'm seeing a lot. What else do we got? John gets it. John says there's a second tree on the shelf next to the bunny. That's right. Little pastel Easter themed tree. My wife found that, picked it out, put it up. John, you're smart. I decorate some too. John says he loves how my wife decorates. That's fair. She does do a lot of the decoration, a significant amount, but I help. I'm involved with themes and ideas, and I put stuff in there too, but she does a lot of it. So very fair, very fair. Let's jump right into it. Jump into Mr. Dalton Kincaid, the Buffalo Bills' first round pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, a pick that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, myself included. I thought he would be gone already. I thought he could potentially go to the Green Bay Packers. I thought he could go to the Los Angeles Chargers, much like Brandon Beane did. And then, if all else failed, I thought he would get nabbed by the Dallas Cowboys. I didn't know if Dallas wanted Mayer or Kincaid, but I thought Kincaid made a lot of sense. Once the Bills traded up, that was my thought in my gut. And, I'd done my work on Kincaid pre-draft, and I've told the story a whole bunch. I was driving back from New York City last Monday, and I had the thought in my head of how good Dalton Kincaid was as a pass catcher from the slot and overall, and what he could do to help the Buffalo Bills offense from a size perspective, from a 12 personnel perspective, from a mismatch and dictation perspective, large catch radius, good hands, all of those things. And I wanted to put out a tweet talking about how that could really be the pick at 27 if he's there. And I still had like another 3 hours to drive, and I completely forgot about it. And then the Bills picked Kincaid, and I went to go look for that tweet and realized I didn't tweet it. And it's funny just how the Bills, again, Brandon Beane gets like that itchy trigger finger a little bit and sees a guy that he likes start to fall a little bit. And he moves up 2 spots to move ahead of the Dallas Cowboys, and uses a 4th round pick to do it, pick 130 for them in this draft. So not too much of a give up. Roughly what, from a pick perspective, what the Eagles used to move up to the 9th pick with the Bears to take Jalen Carter. Oh, got a super chat. Sophia says, 1, thank you, Sophia, for being here. 2, thank you very much for the super chat. 3, Sophia says, do you know the real reason for OJ Howard's cut? I thought it was just performance related, maybe monetary related. Maybe for me, I just thought it was he wasn't exactly up to snuff, and what they had in Quentin Morris was comparable enough. I know OJ Howard had 1, maybe 2 good performances with the Texans this past year in 2022, but I think largely he was kind of not an afterthought or a ghost, but just kind of like ineffective. I like what Quentin Morris had. I wouldn't have minded if they kept OJ Howard. I thought he was a little better than he was given credit for this past preseason. But for me, I think it was just weighing what he was versus what Quentin Morris gave you, and then factoring in, if it's close enough, Morris is under cost control for the next couple of years, and is affordable and is younger, cool, let's lean into him and get some more development pieces. Or maybe it was more schematic. But I don't think we really ever heard anything more than just like, guy just got cut. And then from my own individual analysis, putting that together. Very fair. Good question. So Dalton Kincaid, a pick again and I don't want to get too caught up into, we're going to be talking about a lot of schematic pieces in Dalton Kincaid in this opening segment. I don't want to get too caught up in the, is he a tight end? Is he a weapon? He's a wide receiver. He is a tight end, and the Bills will be using more 12 personnel. But let's not get caught up in the idea of if the Bills are using more 12 personnel, because by the literal textbook definition, 12 personnel is 1 running back and 2 tight ends. And if Kincaid and Knox are on the field, that's 12 personnel and that's 2 tight ends. Let's not get caught up too much in, I think, the traditional viewpoint of what 12 personnel is. I think the Bills will be using more 12 personnel this year. Last year, they were one of the lowest teams in the league. I believe per SIS, they were 31st in the league at about a 6% 12 personnel usage rate. They were higher, I think about a 17% usage rate and 21 personnel, which is 2 running backs, 1 tight end. That's because of the usage of Reggie Gilliam. But they did use some 12 personnel formations while they were in 21 personnel. So the percentages and usage rates kind of get muddied. Don't focus on that too much. Focus on, you will see Dalton Kincaid more on this field. I think, as we start to discuss Kincaid here, I think he has the easiest path to the field and the most direct path to the field for 2023 because of his skill set and because of what he offers. So you're going to see an uptick in 12 personnel this year, but don't think about it again. It doesn't necessarily mean like your traditional 12 personnel formations. It doesn't have to be 2 tight ends attached to the line of scrimmage on opposite end of the offensive tackles, kind of bookending the line of scrimmage. It doesn't mean you're going to have 7 men on the line of scrimmage. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have 1 in line attached to the line of scrimmage and the other tight end hipped off it. With Kincaid, he is a tight end, but they can run a lot of the 11 personnel formations that they've ran prior to the season. You're just running it out of 12 personnel. Dalton Kincaid last year in 2022, he had a 55.1% slot snap share in 2022. If you put that into the NFL for 2022, that would be the 8th highest slot rate for tight ends in the NFL in 2022 amongst the 42 tight ends with at least 20% of targets. Again, this is a player who his skill set leads towards the pass game. He's quick, he's athletic in his routes, he's smooth, he's technical. He's got that power slot potential, right? He gets downfield easily. He can be a mismatch based on his size and his athleticism, and those two things combined. He's got a large catch radius. He's capable of running option routes, which are run based on reading defenders and defenses and processing pre to post snap. I really love how he high points the football. He goes up and gets it. And he credits his basketball background for that, talks about how it's similar to going up for a rebound. You go up, you snatch it, you tuck, you protect the ball. And you see that on tape regularly, whether he's on the outside, whether he's in the slot, whether he's in line, whether he's matched up against a linebacker, a nickel corner, a boundary corner, a safety, anybody. When the ball's in the air, it's his. He goes up, he brings it down with his hands, he attacks it, he snatches it, he brings it down. You see that with regularity. As far as a blocker, and I want to talk about this for a little bit because I feel like it's been talked about a lot in a negative way. So he's not a plus blocker, but he's not a bad blocker. I think because he gets talked about as this pass catching tight end, I think it's an assumption is being made that he's not a good blocker. And while it's not the strength of his skill set, by no means is he a bad blocker. He is functional and he is a willing blocker. And just being willing is a huge part of the battle. If you have the effort and the sense of urgency in blocking, that'll carry a decent amount of the way already. I don't think his form or technique is too bad. A lot of it for him is just his overall size, at 245 pounds, give or take a couple pounds on the week. Like, he's got long muscle, he's strong, but he's not the biggest guy. So he's not your traditional tight end in terms of, attach him to the formation and have him block defensive ends or big, thick, powerful, physical defensive linemen. When he's in that role, he's more of a shielder. He's more of an escorter, more of a shepherd in those ways. But if you are using him as your second tight end or in that F position, that move tight end aspect, right? He can dig out safeties. He can crack on outside linebackers or dig out outside linebackers. You can watch him pick up middle linebackers at the second level. Of course, he's going to win the size matchup and the physicality matchup against nickel corners or outside corners. So he's not, again, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a plus blocker. I'm not going to sit and say that that's a tremendous, aspect of his game, but it's not a weakness, especially when you put that together with his pass catching ability. He is a pass catching tight end. So the fact that he is willing and functional is a huge bonus. I know in one of the instant reaction episodes that myself and Greg Thompson did, someone compared him to Mike Gesicki. I don't think that could be farther from the truth. Mike Gesicki was and is not a functional blocker and didn't really put forward a lot of effort in that regard. That is not true for Dalton Kincaid. So just because his strength lies in being a pass-catching, athletic tight end, don't get it twisted and think that that means he can't block or he's not willing or he's not functional in that world. Is it a plus? No. Is it a weakness or a deficiency or a vulnerability? No. Also, could it get better working in the NFL, getting coached up by Aaron Kromer, a guy who helped coach up the blocking of Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp with his time in LA, guys who became some of the best blockers at their positions, and again, non-offensive lineman positions. I think you will see an improvement in his game from a blocking standpoint. And again, it's not a deficiency. It's not a negative. Is it as strong as his, pass catching ability? No, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Again, functional, willing blocker, more of a shielder, more of a shepherd, more of an escorter, but he will fit up against second and third level defenders. And again, on guys that he has the size advantage on, it's going to work even more. Oh, and like John says here, I bet Kromer will tune up his blocking, especially if he's willing. That's a fair point. And also a good comment here from John, who says, especially a year with the Bills training staff as opposed to some other training staff in the league. Yes, the Bills, knock on wood, their training staff, their weight room, their facilities, the workout program, the dietary regimen, all of those things together, it gets talked about a lot by current players, by players who left, incoming players. It's something that the Bills have really hung their hat on. And prior to this past season, it's worked out from an injury perspective and on the field perspective, as the Bills have largely, for the most part, been a healthy team, again, aside from this past year. Donnie says, we still don't know Kincaid's 40 time, but he's obviously fast enough to get downfield. Yes, most definitely. He had some injury stuff, so he didn't run the 40, didn't have a lot of testing measurables and metrics throughout the pre-draft process. But yes, do not worry about his speed whatsoever. Now, we talked about the 12 personnel piece, and this is something I talked about on the show pre-Dalton Kincaid. I've talked about it on Twitter. For me, 12 personnel is the ultimate dictation piece, or one of the ultimate dictation pieces in today's NFL. If you have 12 personnel, and again, when you're 12, your two tight ends in that 12 personnel, when they're both functional blockers and functional in the route distribution and functional in the pass game, that's really where it comes in. If you're running a lot of 12 personnel, and no disrespect, one of your tight ends is Dawson Knox and the other is Tommy Sweeney, it doesn't have the same level of effect as it does when you've got two legitimate tight ends who can be a threat in the pass game and a threat to block and a threat in the physical aspect, right? So when you go into 12 personnel, you can immediately start to dictate to the defense. When you go into 12, the defense has to answer several questions because you put the onus on them to adjust to you. Does the defense, if you come out in 12 personnel, does the defense stay in nickel? If they stay in nickel, do they have a nickel corner who can match up with one or both of your tight ends on the field in the pass game? Does their nickel corner have the size and strength and length to match up with your tight ends? Or in the case of Knox and Kincaid, do they have the size and strength and length and the speed and athleticism to match up in pass coverage against Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid? Also, if you run the ball, can your nickel corner fit the run versus a tight end? Does your nickel corner have the size and frame and tenacity to fit the run and fill based on whatever numbers are in the box or whatever the line of scrimmage looks like from an offensive perspective? If the defense can't stay in nickel, do they go with three linebackers or three safeties because they're getting beat up in the run and because their nickel corner doesn't have the physical profile or presence to match the tight ends in coverage? So that's another piece too. If they stay in nickel, cool. Are you getting beat up in the run? Or you're staying in nickel, but your nickel corner is too small and doesn't have the physical frame and profile and presence to be able to match with those tight ends in coverage. So, okay, you go to three linebackers or three safeties. Can your third linebacker or your third safety, can they function in pass coverage? Do they have the speed and coverage ability and athleticism to match up with Dawson Knox or Dalton Kincaid? Are they able to function in man coverage, in zone coverage? Are they deficient in one? And if they are deficient in one, by how much? Also a piece to consider, are you regularly in nickel defense? So by putting in your third linebacker or your third safety for this mismatch potential, or try to mitigate that mismatch potential, that third linebacker, third safety you're putting in, are they a regular part of your defense from a weekly snap share rate? Do they know all the checks and adjustments? How much of a benefit are they from a physical perspective versus the run or the pass versus your 12 personnel tight ends? And does that outweigh any potential concerns from a coverage and or knowledge and adjustment standpoint? All of those questions and more have to be answered on a weekly basis. 12 personnel with two tight ends that can function in both the run and the pass, it allows you to be multiple. It allows you to play rock, paper, scissors, and allows you to throw all three. It allows you to play rock, paper, scissors, and throw rock, throw paper, and throw scissors, because the defenses have to match you, which gives you the advantage and allows you to dictate to them and or put them in disadvantageous positions, either by personnel or alignment. I've spoken about this all off season. I just think it's such a beautiful way to run your offense. Again, if you have the personnel, if you have that versatility, because it puts the defense in a legitimate bind. Think of what it does. Think of it from the flip side, from the Bills defense, right? When you've got Taron Johnson in there and you've got teams that go with heavier personnel, whether it's two running backs, running back and a fullback, or two tight ends, and both tight ends can function in the pass and function in the run. We talk about it all the time. Like, Taron Johnson has to play more like a linebacker this week because the team the Bills are playing use more heavier personnel packages, which means he has to fit the run against these guys, and he's got to be able to match up physically and not get, blown up from a physical or frame perspective against these bigger body tight ends and these bigger body guys. It's different when someone comes out and runs 11 personnel. It's like, oh, okay, they're mainly in 11. Taron's up against a slot wide receiver or any wide receiver. He's fine. But having bigger, stronger, guys who are also athletic and functional in a multitude of ways, in a variety of ways, again, puts the defense into a bind. And then you take Dalton, so you have that piece that sets the foundation. And then you take Dalton Kincaid's ability to work in the middle of the field and underneath versus both man and zone in a variety of ways. That should help Josh Allen and the Bills' passing attack to stabilize a bit more in 2023. In 2022, Josh Allen's average depth of target was 10.2. It was, again, we talked about it a bunch on this show, but that 10.2 average depth of target was a product of the play calls from Ken Dorsey, Josh Allen's willingness and desire to push the ball downfield, and also a bit of Josh Allen's perceived lack of trust or confidence in his teammates' ability to finish when attacking the middle or the underneath areas. You'd see balls. I mean, you saw it right in week one against the Rams. Allen puts one right on McKenzie and it bounces off the shoulder pads, leads to an interception. We saw untimely drops in the middle of the field from a variety of players for the Bills. He really missed, and he being Josh Allen, really missed that security blanket and that safety net that Cole Beasley provided from a consistency and stability standpoint in the slot, but by extension, that control piece in the middle of the field, that easy button, that player who Allen was on the same page with mentally and who knew was going to read the defense, was going to read the coverage, was going to leverage the space, was going to be able to find what area he needed to work into, and more importantly, make the catch. And so again, Allen's average depth of target last year at 10.2 was the second highest in the entire league out of 41 qualifying quarterbacks. The other quarterbacks in that league who are in 2022 who had an average depth of target of 9.0 or greater, Marcus Mariota was first at 10.5. You had Allen at 10.2, Tua at 10.1. Think of these quarterbacks, one, in a vacuum as quarterbacks, but two, think of the teams and the offenses they were on when you're looking at the quarterbacks who had an average depth of target of 9 or higher in 2022. So again, Marcus Mariota was first at 10.5. Josh Allen was second at 10.2. Tua third at 10.1. Mitchell Trubisky fourth at 10.0. Zach Wilson fifth at 9.7. Derek Carr tied for fifth at 9.7. Justin Fields, Jacoby Brissett, Russell Wilson tied for seventh at 9.5. Taylor Heineke and Lamar Jackson tied for 10th at 9.2. And then one of Miami's backup quarterbacks, their third string quarterback, Skylar Thompson, was at 12th at 9.0. So of those quarterbacks I just named, only Josh Allen, Tua, and Skylar Thompson were on teams that finished in the top 10 for passing DVOA. Again, DVOA is an efficiency metric. And so again, Allen, Tua, Skylar Thompson, they're Josh Allen on the Bills, Tua and Skylar Thompson on the Miami Dolphins. The Bills finished second overall in the league in passing DVOA. Miami finished fourth. It's hard to live consistently and or efficiently the further you push the ball downfield. And we saw that down the stretch as the Bills passing DVOA, which again finished second overall on the year, was ranked 12th from week 16 through the divisional round loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. And Josh Allen's average depth of target from week 16 through the divisional round was 13.6. He was first in that stretch by almost a full 3 yards ahead of anyone. An average depth of target of 13.6 is wild. We talked about it on the show. We broke it down in the film room. I'd spoken about it on Twitter. And we know if we're thinking in the back of our heads or in the forefront of our minds, think about those last weeks, the game against the Bears and the game against New England to end the year, and the game against Miami in the wild card round, the game against Cincinnati, just the constant and consistent pushing the ball downfield. And again, some of that is Ken Dorsey. Some of it is Josh Allen's, bloodlust and him wanting to go for the throat and push the ball downfield, which he is a very good deep ball thrower. Let's not get it twisted. But it's hard to live that way consistently. Their low percentage throws are lower percentage throws for a reason. And again, part of it is Ken Dorsey. Part of it is Josh Allen's willingness. But also some of it was just him not feeling comfortable or secure going over the middle of the field because he didn't have that security blanket or safety net like Cole Beasley. And even when Cole Beasley came back, he was the Bills' best slot receiver, which he probably shouldn't have been considering he was out of football for the majority of the year. And then he came in off the street and was still kind of their best slot receiver, which again, he should not have been. But then he wasn't really up to full speed and in real great football shape to the point where he could command like 80% of the snap share like he used to and a ton of targets. So it was a deficient area of the field. It was a deficient part of the offense, and it contributed to some of the struggles. And again, with Allen and that downfield aspect of the team, the Bills are going to have that vertical presence, that vertical push, that vertical threat, that element in their offense. But now with Dalton Kincaid, they have the opportunity to add more of what we saw when Cole Beasley was a prime target in the offense. The opportunity to have that safety net, that mismatch creator underneath and in the middle of the field that can lead to easier and more efficient play. Dalton Kincaid is a potential easy button or an efficiency button, efficient button, efficiency button, easy button, whatever you want to go with. By extension, I think you start to have that further conversation of, for 2023, is he wide receiver 3 or option 3 or option 4? If you've got Diggs and you've got Davis, is Kincaid 3? Is Dawson Knox 3? Right? And then which one of them is 4? I think that rounds out your top 4 in terms of who's going to dominate the snap share and then also the usage rate overall. You could even potentially have it from a target share standpoint, but I don't want to start getting into targets. That's too much and too predictive in a variety of ways. But Thomas coming in saying Kincaid will get 100 plus targets. After Charles said, I'd like to see Kincaid get about 85 targets. That'll be very interesting. John says, smash that like. We're on 45 likes so far. Please, 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 and thank you. If you folks are enjoying this content, as you come in, or if you're in here now and haven't dropped a like, please and thank you, drop a like. Sincerely, it goes a long way, and it's very sincerely appreciated. Also, what has to be talked about too is that rookie wall or that rookie hurdle that tight ends seem to hit more than any other position. I was listening to The Athletic last week or 2 weeks ago, and Robert Mays had Jack Doyle on, former Indianapolis Colts tight end, and he asked Doyle about, what contributes to those struggles for rookie tight ends that it seems to hit that position more than others. And Doyle talked about just everything that mentally gets put on a tight end, because you also think about from the perspective of what they're responsible for. Not only do you need to know your route on this play, okay, am I running a 10-yard out no matter what? Or is it, if it's this coverage, I'm doing A. If it's this other coverage, I'm doing B, which means after the snap, you have to, process what's going on in front of you. Did the coverage change pre to post snap, or are you just straight reading it on the fly and it's the same and you have to read it on the fly? Is there a defensive end lined up above you who's impeding your release off the line of scrimmage? Or if you are in the slot, are you getting a free release? What's the leverage of the defender in front of you? You have to do all of that on any given play, whether you're running, a called set route or making a read adjustment or a sight adjustment. And then you have to do that at the same time and in the way that the quarterback anticipates you will, so that way you can be quarterback friendly. And on top of all that, from the passing perspective, you have to know pass protections. You have to know the run blocking scheme. You have to know on this play, what are we doing? Okay, they're lined up in this front, in this alignment. Okay, I'm picking up the defensive end, but they shift. Who am I picking up now? Is it the nickel or the overhang or the apex? Is it this safety? Is it this box linebacker? Who's the Mike? Okay, the center's IDing him, the quarterback's IDing him. Am I supposed to run a route on this play? Is the quarterback calling me in because he wants me to stay and pass protect? Okay, am I coming in and attaching to the formation? Am I going to be in the backfield? All of these pieces, you have so many responsibilities from a route distribution standpoint, but from a run blocking and pass blocking standpoint, there's a lot of mental workload that is placed onto tight ends in the NFL on top of the already physical demand, which is enough from an on-field execution standpoint. So that's also, I think, going to come into play. And I think that'll come into play with, his target share. I know what a lot of you folks are kind of putting into the chat now. It'll be interesting to see what target share he commands and what overall volume of work he sees. But I do think, again, the Bills are going to run more 12 personnel just by default because Kincaid is classified as a tight end. But I think you will see 12 personnel used in 11 personnel formations. I think you're going to see Dalton Kincaid lined up on the line of scrimmage, next to an offensive tackle. I think you'll see him lined up, attached to the formation or hipped off Dawson Knox, who's in line as your traditional Y tight end. And so you've kind of got, 7 men around the line of scrimmage. I think you'll see him in the slot. I think you could see him out wide. I think you could see him in motion. I think there's a lot you can do with him and with his skill set because he is basically a power slot receiver. He is a slot wide receiver with the frame and size of a tight end who's a functional and willing blocker. That's what you need to see him as. He's got the speed to get up the seam and get vertical against linebackers, against safeties. He's got the speed to do that against nickel corners as well, but then he's also got the size advantage against those nickel corners because he's got that large catch radius and he'll go up and he'll pluck the ball. He gives you some yards after catch. He does not go down easy. He'll juke and shake some guys in the open field. He'll also put his shoulder down and run through defenders, whether it's a corner, whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a safety. He gives you a lot of, again, multiplicity, a lot of variability. He contributes to that rock, paper, scissors element for an offense. His path is the easiest to the field of all the rookies. I also don't think that's like a hugely surprising statement. Usually first round picks have an easier path to the field. Usually they're either a high level talent or they play a position that was a high position of need or of value to a team. And Brandon Beane had spoken about it a bunch this offseason and talking about getting weapons for Josh Allen and weapons for the offense. And it doesn't have to be like literal quotes from him saying it doesn't have to be a receiver or a running back or a tight end. It could be anything. It's all about being multiple, and it gives you the opportunity to create mismatches. And that's what Dawson Knox too, but that's what Dalton Kincaid does. He gives you the opportunity to create mismatches. If you have a corner on him that has the speed and athleticism to stay with him, that corner probably isn't big enough to stand up against Dalton Kincaid if Kincaid's run blocking him, or he probably doesn't have the size and the frame to match up with him physically in the route distribution or at the catch point. And if you do have somebody that has the size and the frame and the strength to match up with him against the run or match up with him physically in the route distribution at the catch point, there's a good chance he probably doesn't have the athleticism or the speed. Again, a dictation piece, a weapon that allows you to force the defense's hand and make them answer a multitude of questions on every single play week to week, and allows you to turn dials up and down and pull on levers. Also from Thomas, he's a red zone weapon. He's very good in the red zone with his athleticism, with his fluidity. Again, that versatility and that alignment. You can line him up out wide. You want to throw him a fade. You want to have him line up in the slot and run a slot fade. Are you leaking him out across the formation from an inline perspective? Who is he getting matched up with? There's a lot of chess piece pluses and positives from the drafting of Dalton Kincaid. Interesting comment from T. Dobbs. Dobbs says, I see Kincaid as more of a Cooper Kupp than a Travis Kelce. Oh, very interesting. And John says, yeah, if Cooper Kupp weighed 240 pounds. That's fair. Interesting. Other comment from the other John saying a first down and move the chains weapon. Yes, the dude who, the proverbial or prototypical guy who knows where the sticks are and knows where the space is and knows where to sit. He can you see so many routes from him, those Y option routes, or even, option route from the slot where he releases and he sees the coverage and immediately drops, sinks his hips, sits, catches. And then when he catches it, he quickly tucks it and turns into a runner. He turns into a ball carrier quickly. He gets that ball and gets upfield in a hurry. I think he's a plus matchup guy. Again, a nice dictation piece for the Buffalo Bills offense. He has the easiest path to the field. It's just going to be a matter of, one, if he stays healthy, knock on wood. But two, him just picking up the offense, getting into it from a mental perspective. We've heard multiple people talk from a passing perspective with this Bills offense about how sophisticated it is and how complex it is. So we'll see how he does from that regard. And then the run blocking piece. Yeah, he is going to have to adjust to NFL size and strength and speed at the defensive line position, linebacker position, safety position, and corners, and see if he can continue to be a functional piece. Again, he's going to be a willing blocker, but his functionality will be tested against NFL size and speed and strength. But this is going to be a nice weapon and addition for the Buffalo Bills. Very excited from that perspective. Now, move on to the Buffalo Bills' second round pick, guard from the University of Florida, Mr. O'Cyrus Torrence. Someone that Brandon Beane talked about it. They didn't think he'd be there. They didn't think Kincaid would really be there in the first round. They didn't think Torrence would be there in the second. I didn't think O'Cyrus Torrence would be there in the second. This is somebody who He had a lot of first round buzz. I didn't think he would necessarily go in the first round, but I thought anywhere from the late 30s to mid 40s was high prime Osiris Torrence territory. He was either, depending on whose board you were looking at or whose evaluations you were going by, he was either one or two in terms of the top guards in this draft. People either had him at number one, or people largely either had him as number one, or Steve Avila, the guard from TCU, as number one. So I just figured, yeah, by 50 at worst, I thought he would be gone. But lo and behold, Bills are sitting there at 59, and he's there. And this is a player who, we'll start with the evaluation piece for Osiris Torrence. You start with the physicality. I think he starts with his hands. He's got strong grip strength. He's got huge hands. Told the story a couple times before. We were at the Senior Bowl, myself and several members of the Cover One team back in February down in Mobile, Alabama. And myself and Eric Turner were standing next to each other watching one-on-ones in the end zone. And so one-on-ones are offensive line versus defensive line, and they're literally just going one-on-one. There's like an imaginary quarterback, and they're just going one-on-one with each other. And at one point, Osiris Torrence finished his rep, and he came and stood in front of me, and you just see how huge he is. And then I looked at his hands, and I tapped Eric and pointed because I could see that his gloves said 4XL. And I was just I've never seen gloves that big or hands that big. It starts with his hands, extremely strong grip, huge hands. I would like to see him lean into that more and get coached up with proper punch timing and location with his hands in terms of usage overall, with those big, strong hands and his arm length, which is very good arm length. He's got 33 and 7/8 inch arms, which is roughly around the 75th percentile, which is very good. Defenders should not be able to get into his body. He is a people mover. He's big, he's strong, he's physical, he's wide framed, he's wide bodied, but he's not basically fat. He's wide framed, but he's a solid dude. He can absorb second level blitzers, and I literally mean that, absorb them. You see a linebacker come from the second level and he hits them or absorbs them and either just stops their momentum and stalemates them, or will crumple them and make them almost melt once he makes contact. One of my favorite things about him is the way he refits his hands. And when I say refit his hands, that means, say, just trying to make it simple, say he goes to block somebody right here and somebody gets in on his hands or knocks one of his hands down, or he goes to grab or he goes to punch and his hand gets outside a little bit. He's got good hand refitting to the point where he can take that hand and get it right back underneath and clamp it on the inside on the hip, or he can get it back into the chest and then combine that with his strength and his body control and be able to torque his opponent. So his ability to hand fight and refit his hands combined with the strength of his hands is a real strong piece. He can turn and seal his man with ease, again, because he's a monster. He does have some inconsistent connection when he gets to the second level or when he gets in space. So if he's climbing to block a linebacker from a double team, or if he's pulling and looping around and going to the second level, I think that could be a byproduct of his somewhat limited athleticism and or limited movement in space. But you do have that inconsistent connection piece. But when he does connect, it's over for a defender. He also plays a little high when he pulls. When he's down blocking, he can collapse an entire side when down blocking on pin and pulls, or when he's washing down on split zone. The biggest question for me with him will be, how does he fare versus the athleticism and versus the quick speed rushers in the NFL? His build and his frame didn't lend itself to matching athletic or quick rushers or recovering versus speed rushers in college. NFL defenders will be more dialed up in terms of knowledge, pass rush plan, pass rush moves, and overall athleticism and speed. I think against power guys, he's largely going to be okay. You saw some failures in his anchor at times, mainly, one real rough rep against Jalen Carter for Georgia, but that's going to happen for almost anybody and everybody against Jalen Carter. So I think overall power guys, or guys that are going to try and go through him, I don't think that's going to work. It's going to be those quick rushers, those guys with the quick get off who can create that soft edge or that soft shoulder and try and turn the arc on him. Or if teams use pass rush alignment and certain front alignments that put him into isolated situations or put him into space, can he survive in space? Can his footwork be consistent? Is he quick enough? Is he athletic enough? Can he get his hands on his opponent? Can he recover? That's going to be the biggest question. I don't have questions about his strength or his ability to, work and win from a physicality perspective, but I think there will be questions from an overall athleticism standpoint against quick or speed rushers. From a scheme fit standpoint, I think he can move enough for zone runs, like your outside zone or your wide zone, but he's at his best working downhill, working from a people moving standpoint. So your inside zone runs, your duo runs, or pin and pulls where he's not the puller, where he's the pin guy. He's that guy executing that down block. Or again, if you want to run split zone, he's washing down. He's that down blocker. What's interesting is, and I mentioned this before, his fit with the current interior of the Buffalo Bills offensive line. Right now, if you're looking at Connor McGovern, Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, and David Edwards, the Bills don't have an interior offensive lineman heavier than 308 pounds. So all of them are relatively light compared to O'Cyrus Torrence, who came in at 330 pounds. And then you add in their skill sets. Part of it is due to, their weight, but you take McGovern and Morse and Bates and Edwards, and these are guys who are athletic. They move well in space. How does O'Cyrus Torrence, who again is 330 pounds and is more of a physical and imposing guard than he is a function in space, athletic Marvel type of guard, how does he fit and what does that mean schematically? If he starts, do we start to see more downhill runs or more physical runs? Do we see, like I mentioned, more duo, more inside zone, more pin and pull with him as the pin or the down blocker, or more split zone? Again, he is functional enough in outside zone, but it isn't a strong suit. He can function in mid zone. He can pull a little, but it's overall kind of meh. You want him being that person to work in short spaces. You want him to be, with the comment here from Spud, who says, wash down. He's going to destroy people. Road grader. He's going to erase people in the red zone 1 yard line. You want him in that short area. You want people to be pushed into a phone booth with him and allow him to get those paws and those vice grips for hands onto defenders and control. He's also very smart. You listen to him do a film breakdown with Brandon Thorne, who's one of the preeminent voices in the trench evaluation world for offensive linemen and defensive linemen. And he's extremely heady and smart in terms of how he reads what's going on in front of him. That's also another piece too, whether it's the run game or it's the pass game. He's very heady. He's very aware. His head is always on a swivel. He's good at picking up games and stunts. The biggest question will be, does he have the athleticism and the quickness and the foot speed to stay with those stunts, to stay with those games? Because from a mental standpoint, a football IQ standpoint, he's got it. I showed one clip on Twitter of they were playing against Tennessee, and he's got a defensive tackle lined up, head up on him. And on the snap, the defensive tackle tries to dive inside. So Torrence just goes with him and buries him, puts him right into the dirt. And with Brandon Thorne, Torrence talked about, they broke down that exact play, and Torrence talked about, I was just trying to turn him and seal him, but on the snap, he dove inside. So I just went with him and put him into the dirt. And that little piece showing the ability to adjust mid-rep and mid-snap versus what you had initially planned, that's extremely encouraging that he has the mental wherewithal and football IQ to be able to pull that off and to go with that skill set. And it'll be interesting, again, to see how he fits, because he is very, and I'm not saying this in a bad way or in a good way, he is very unlike the rest of the interior offensive linemen the Buffalo Bills have. Connor McGovern, Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, David Edwards. The heaviest amongst all of them is only 308 pounds. O'Cyrus Torrence is 330. Those guys are all movement guys, space guys, better pass protectors than they are run blockers, guys with foot speed and quickness, and just get them out in space and let them work. I keep doing it. I keep calling him Torrence, and it drives me nuts. I'm going to do that so much through his entire career with the Bills. O'Cyrus Torrence, on the other hand, again, 330 pounds, big, physical, imposing, nasty, people mover, guy who can climb to the second level and can move a little bit, but you want him working downhill. The Bills really haven't been a downhill physical running team or a downhill physical offense. That might tie in a little bit more with Dalton Kincaid, right? Even though, again, Kincaid is more of a pass catching tight end than he is a run blocking tight end or pass blocking tight end. If you have that bigger piece, that 12 personnel piece. Again, you don't have to be a physically dominant, mauling tight end, but if you're just 246 pounds and you're playing against a defense that's running nickel and their nickel corner is, I don't know, like 5'10, 190, you have the physical advantage, right? And so maybe with more 12 personnel and maybe with Osiris Torrence, maybe you get more of a downhill physical displacement effort in the run game. Maybe you get more of those at you runs. Again, duo, inside zone, more of those. We're not going north. We're not going east and west. We're going north and south. We're going to create displacement because that's also where it's real pretty when you see Torrence work those blocks when, he's working a combo block or a deuce block and he's got that tackle right in front of him and he and his right tackle just drive that defensive tackle off the line and he climbs to the second level or the right tackle slips off and he just owns the 3-tech and just turns him and mauls him. It's a real physical presence and it's a different element that currently exists with the Buffalo Bills offense. His path to the field is ultimately going to be determined by two pieces. One, Ryan Bates. I think that's the battle we're looking at right now. Right guard, Torrence versus Bates. And also a little bit by extension, Mitch Morse. If anything happens to Mitch Morse, God forbid, and knock on wood, I think Ryan Bates slides into center, which means that would open up the right guard spot for Torrence. But this is probably my top training camp battle to watch as of now. It's real interesting to see how he fits in from a schematic perspective. And I also think if he beats out Bates, we also have to keep an eye on what we see from an X's and O's and schematic standpoint or philosophy standpoint from the Buffalo Bills. Because even when Devin Singletary was more the gap scheme runner, so more pin and pulls, more tackle wrap or dart that we've shown on this show that we've shown in the film room where Spencer Brown or Deion Dawkins is coming around the other side and going around the tackle or coming around and going between the other tackle and the guard. Or when they ran gap scheme, it was more pin and pull. And then with Cook, it was more outside zone or some mid zone. They didn't really have a ton of downhill, creating displacement runs. When I say create displacement, I mean, kind of move the line of scrimmage and push and bully the defensive line or the box off the line of scrimmage. They didn't run a ton of inside zone or a ton of duo or these runs that were straight downhill. And I literally mean downhill where it's we're going this way. We're not going that way. We're not going this way. We're going right at you. We're going to push you off the ball. Torrence is a move in that regard. And I also wonder, because Bean talked about, this is an interesting one as well. Bean talked about, Torrence was there at 59 and he was the highest graded guy on their board by far. They didn't necessarily plan to have him there at 59. So I wonder now that they do, did they have a certain run game plan or identity plan this offseason? And with the addition of Torrence, are they either going to try to fit him into that current existing plan that they already had, or are they potentially going to tweak their plan and identity a little bit if he wins that job? It's going to be extremely intriguing. That training camp battle, the preseason performances of him and Ryan Bates. I also wouldn't count out David Edwards, who started for the Super Bowl winning Los Angeles Rams 2 years ago. He was injured last year. He's a Cromer disciple. He fits the scheme and system and what Cromer likes very, very, very well. It'll be interesting to see what we get from Torrence. His skill set, again, big physical mauler with tremendous grip strength. Going to be questionable when it comes to quickness or athleticism, especially from a pass rushing standpoint or against the run versus 3-techs or certain alignments where he's got a speed guy in front of him who's just trying to get penetration and beat him off the snap. But he's heady, he's smart, he's got long arms, he's got strong hands. He has the ability, because he has those long arms and those strong hands, against the speedy guys or the quick guys or the smaller guys, he doesn't necessarily need to get the best form and the best punch. He just needs to get enough of you. And I've seen it on tape where he's an arm's length away, but because those arms are long enough and those hands are heavy and strong, he just needs one quick hand and it can knock a guy completely off platform and allow a run to still succeed. So you've got that big physical mauler introduced to an interior offensive line that is known for being a little smaller, a little more athletic, and a little bit more of, movement in space kind of guys. So I think his timeline also is going to come down a bit to what happens with Mitch Morse and what happens with Ryan Bates. I don't think just because Bates was re-signed last year and the Bills matched what the Bears offered, I don't think that necessarily means he's, locked in at that spot for the coming years. I would think McGovern's spot at left guard is not sewn up, but almost pretty guaranteed to a degree, unless he comes into camp and is just absolutely god awful in camp and in the preseason. So his timeline and path to the field in terms of Osiris Torrence is going to come out. Can he beat Ryan Bates? And then by extension, is Mitch Morse healthy? Because if Morse goes down, I think they move Bates to center and then they put Torrence at guard. But we're going to see, or maybe they really do want to start Torrence and they want to use Ryan Bates as this super sub because he can play both guard spots. He can play center, and he's not built for tackle with his arm length and his size, but he does have tackle experience from his time at Penn State. So maybe they want to use him as this super sub, especially because they didn't address tackle in the draft. And their tackles right now are Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, David Quessenberry, and Tommy Doyle. Spencer Brown is still a question mark, which means the guys behind him are even bigger question marks. The tackle group, for me, is still a cause for concern. Even if you believe in Spencer Brown, after Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins, it's David Quessenberry and Tommy Doyle, which to me are somewhat red flags and big question marks. So maybe they want to use Bates as the super sub. Again, it's for me, it's the top training camp battle to watch, preseason battle to watch. Bates versus Torrence, and by extension, what kind of scheme and system are they running offensively from a play calling standpoint, or even maybe from a mentality standpoint? Because a guy like Torrence, when you drop him into an offensive line, he changes your identity a little bit just because of his skill set and his size and his attitude and his mind frame changes things a little bit. So very interested to see what happens there. And I'm very excited. Cash says Torrence can pull too. He can pull a little bit. I don't love him as a puller because, again, he's not the most fleet of foot. He can pull. It's not his strong suit. It's not his strength. He also comes out a little high and runs a little high as the puller. I would much, much, much rather have him be the guy who pins or the down block guy, the person who's washing, than be the actual puller, especially with how good in space and how good of a mover McGovern is and Morse is, and even Spencer Brown and Dawkins to a degree. Let them lean into their athletic skill sets. Give me the big physical mauler as the guy who's down blocking. Pull him from time to time just to keep the defense honest, but I wouldn't say pulling is necessarily a strong suit, especially with his inconsistency in connecting with defenders on the move, whether as a puller or somebody climbing to the second level. Spud has a question. Spud says, Ant, I have a question. With Dalton Kincaid drafted, does Dorsey rewrite the playbook or create new plays, parentheses, steal from KC for Dalton Kincaid? So what's very interesting is Ken Dorsey, from his time when he was a quarterback at the University of Miami, they used their tight ends a bunch, both whether it was one tight end with Jeremy Shockey or running two tight ends. Then from his time at Carolina, this was the Ed Dixon, Greg Olson Carolina Panthers with Cam Newton at quarterback. Ken Dorsey is very well versed in the tight end world. I know a decent amount of people are down on Ken Dorsey. First of all, everybody steals from everybody every offseason. So especially with how Kansas City leaned into 12 and 13 personnel last year, I would imagine he steals or takes some things from the Kansas City Chiefs or from a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who have been using two tight ends well for a while, whether it was this past year or maybe he dips into the bucket from several years past when they had Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. But I trust that Ken Dorsey knows how to use two tight end sets. In fact, I would think that might be his more comfortable avenue in terms of play design and play calling, both from just his experience as a player, but also from his time in Carolina and kind of where and how he cut his teeth. So I think he will steal a little bit from successful 12 and 13 personnel teams, but I do have some confidence in him to kind of scheme things up for both of these guys based on his familiarity and desire to kind of work with these personnel groupings. That's where I'm kind of, good comment from Pops. I keep forgetting. Yeah, Ike Bacher's back from injury. I keep forgetting. I keep forgetting. Noah says Nick Broeker will surprise some people. We're going to talk about Nick Broeker as we go through. I think I see, hold on, I got to stop. I think I see a super chat. DF Forever. Oh, that's hilarious. I swear I didn't see this comment ahead of time. One, DF, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the super chat. That's awesome. DF says, should I remind everyone how much Dorsey watched tight ends get used proper in Carolina? Thank you for the show at Cover One. Appreciate you. Thank you for being here and for the kind words. Yeah. And I think, and this is a fair point from Dobbs. Dobbs says they wanted two tight ends last year, but OJ Howard bombed. Yeah, maybe they really wanted to lean into that 12 personnel piece, but they just didn't see it from OJ Howard, and they didn't have enough faith in Sweeney and Morris. And I disagree with this one from Spud. Spud says our offensive playbook doesn't have 2 tight end plays. I don't think we can make a firm statement either way saying it does or it doesn't. I will say the Bills roster last year, where your tight end grouping is Knox and then Tommy Sweeney and Quentin Morris, I don't think that's a holistic tight end grouping that is going to lead to a lot of 2 tight end usage for a team. No disrespect to Sweeney and no disrespect to Morris. If Sweeney's your tight end too, he's not very athletic. He's not tremendously functional in the pass game. He's more of just a run blocking type of guy, right? So you're limited in what you can do from a 2 tight end perspective. And if you're having a second tight end in there, that's like Sweeney, that's basically like a jumbo blocker. So you don't have that matchup that matchup advantage creation. You don't have that dictation piece because you don't have 2 tight ends who are both functional in the run and the pass like you do with Kincaid and Knox. Quentin Morris is a little more into that mold, but he was still kind of in the infancy of his career. And so I don't think you're really creating things around a guy like Quentin Morris, even though I do like Quentin Morris. And to Ron's point here, you aren't taking good players off the field for Sweeney or Morris. And I think that's a part too, right? Like, are you think about last year's team, even with the ups and downs for a lot of guys, are you taking Jamison Crowder off the field for Sweeney or Morris? Are you taking Isaiah McKenzie off the field for either? Are you taking Khalil Shakir off? I guess that's more of a toss-up. Cole Beasley at the end, obviously not. Like, so maybe they already have those packages in and those plays in to answer that question. Maybe we just didn't see them last year because of the personnel they had on this team. So very fair. Oh, yeah. RJ says a similar piece. We didn't have a second tight end worth giving the ball to last year. Thomas says Dorsey needs an offensive plan, not a bunch of random plays. I recognize the struggles. This is a theme of mine. I don't want to get too far off topic, but I recognize the struggles that Ken Dorsey had. I don't think he's as bad as everyone makes him out to be. Again, this offense, though it struggled a bit down the stretch, they still finished second overall in passing DVOA, and I think second overall in offensive DVOA. I had some problems with some sequencing, some red zone design, some connectivity and easy buttons or lack thereof for Josh Allen that ultimately falls at Ken Dorsey's feet. But I do think some of it was tied to the roster makeup, the talent and player dynamics and skill sets they had from a weaponry standpoint. I also think what can't be discounted, there were a lot of plays that were well designed and could have been executed if the offensive line could have held up. There were plays, the Detroit one is filled with them on Thanksgiving, where there's guys that are clearing and running wide open downfield, and Allen can't get to him because when they clear, he's already had to be running for his life because the offensive line gave up a pressure in like a second and a half. There are so many things that come together to make an offense have a bad game or have a play not work. I'm not saying Dorsey's infallible. I'm not saying he doesn't need to get better. I'm not saying he doesn't, deserve to be criticized for certain areas, but I think he's the low-hanging fruit and everybody's blaming every problem on Ken Dorsey. He does need to get better, I think, with some sequencing things and some adjustments and some pointed modes of attack and getting into his bag in a way that makes Josh Allen a bit more comfortable early in the game and then being able to come back to those easy buttons with regularity. But I think there's a lot of variables that went into the struggles of the offense last year that isn't just kind of blame it on Ken Dorsey. Not saying that you're saying that, but I just see this comment a lot where anytime you talk about anything, people come through and are like, well, Dorsey can't do this, or hopefully Dorsey can do this. And it's more kind of a disparaging remark than it is a general question or thought process, but fair to your point. Oh, good comment here from Joe DeRosa, Cover One member. What's up, Joe? Joe says, I feel like the best part of Torrence to start is that it allows Bates to move to center if need be without a drop off in guard play, hopefully. I think that's very well said and echoes one of the sentiments I mentioned. I think you can never have enough depth on the offensive line. I don't care where. At the bookends, at the tackles, and the interior, you can never have enough offensive line depth. At some point, knock on wood, unfortunately, someone on your offensive line is going to get banged up. Same thing on the defensive line. These guys are always banging in the trenches. Their heads, their fingers, their wrists, their knees, their legs. Guys are getting rolled up on. Guys are getting speared. Guys are getting hit on every single play. There is never a play for an offensive or defensive lineman where you are not in the danger zone. There is never a play. Every single snap you're getting hit. Even just a basic run play, say you block your man, there's a chance your running back or somebody's going to roll up and hit your knee and blow your knee out. Like, it's a high danger area. You can never have enough depth on the interior. I do like the idea of Torrence versus Bates straight up, and Torrence having the opportunity to beat Bates at right guard. But I very, very, very much like the idea of, yeah, if anything happens to Mitch Morse, God forbid, it's like, okay, Ryan Bates moves to center and Torrence steps into guard and we see what we got, right? Now you have a little more functionality and a little more depth. And I think that's a good point. Ooh, comment here from Pop saying, take Bobby Hart off the field for Dalton Kincaid. I don't have the numbers, but we know like the Bills used a lot of that those 6 offensive lineman looks with Bobby Hart as a 6 offensive lineman. Now you kind of remove Bobby Hart with a Dalton Kincaid potentially. Now you have somebody that's a functional blocker, but also functional in the pass game. When Bobby Hart was on the field, you knew it was probably going to be a run, or if it's a pass, he's not going out in the route distribution. Now with Kincaid, you've got a guy that the defense has to honor in both ways, in the run and the pass. Very interesting. Good comment here from Ron. Having a year under his belt will really help Dorsey moving forward. Absolutely. Again, I know they struggled down the stretch. I even talked about it earlier with some Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid numbers. The Bills' passing offense in terms of DVOA was 12th from week 16 through the divisional round. That's not what you want. You want it the opposite. You want to be hitting your stride and improving as the season goes on. But at the end of the day, this offense finished 2nd overall in DVOA, 2nd overall in passing DVOA for a first-time play caller and offensive coordinator. I think it's fair to have criticism. It's fair to have concern. But I also think it's fair to have a decent amount of optimism. Again, it's his first year, and he was largely successful. This team won 13 games, and they were one of the best offenses in football for a decent stretch of the year, although they fizzled out at the end. So he does need to improve. He does need to get better. But, having one of the best offenses in the NFL in your first year as a play caller in OC is a pretty cool foundation. Oh, DF says, no, this is the theme everywhere. Dorsey this, Dorsey that. Dorsey did not have an offensive line or weapon like this to work with. Silly to think that we will not change up. We will see. An excellent comment from Ron. I agree. Yeah, he says our offensive line was much, much worse than it was in 2020 and 2021. Yeah, the 22 offensive line between Saffold and Brown and the mercurial ups and downs and roller coasters and the injuries, it was a bit rough. Oh, good comment here from Jeffrey. Jeff says, I think McDermott thinks Dorsey is ready for this next step of offense, or he wouldn't feel comfortable being the DC play caller. He's trusting him. That's a good point. That's actually a really good point. Something I never really thought of. I haven't, not directly related to this. With McDermott running the defense now from a preparation standpoint and an in-game play calling perspective, it means he has less oversight for the offensive side of the ball. So he has to trust Ken Dorsey a little bit more. He's got to have faith in Dorsey and that offensive side to kind of police themselves, because he's still going to have his, finger on the pulse of the game and the team, but it's hard. Legitimately, it is a hard thing to call one side of the ball and still run the overall show. And especially McDermott hasn't done it before. When I say hasn't done it before, I mean be the defensive play caller, but also be the head coach from a week in, week out standpoint. He's done it in spurts, but he hasn't done it with complete regularity. But I do think that's a fair point. I think that shows that he's got trust in the offensive side of the ball from a game plan perspective and an in-game perspective. And maybe that played into a little bit. Very fair. Very fair. Very fair. What else do we got? What else? Richard says, I think we're going to be extremely surprised with our 12 personnel. All right. Now, let's move on to the next piece here. Player that is everyone's favorite. Actually, before I mention that favorite, let me mention something that is legitimately my favorite, and that's One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Delicious sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni. They make their own homemade blue cheese, which is amazing. I don't know if I like the pizza better or the blue cheese, genuinely. I don't know if I'm enjoying the pizza or I'm just using the pizza as a vehicle to get the blue cheese in my mouth, but then the pizza is great even without the blue cheese. Everything they make is quality and top notch. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. They also do a lot of good for the community. I plug this every week. Toys for Tots come holiday time, partnering with Roswell to try and knock out cancer in the fall and Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Working with the Alzheimer's Foundation, working with the SPCA. They just do a ton for the community in the city of Buffalo. from a drive and initiative standpoint and a generosity standpoint. And then on top of it, they make the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That's not an exaggeration from me. Get yourself some one pie pizza, find the online menu in the episode show notes. Again, whether here on YouTube or one of the podcasting apps or platforms, when you go there, tell them disguised coverage. That's not proper terminology for what the show is called. Tell them disguised coverage sent you. Now, I said this a bit sarcastically. One pie pizza is my favorite. I mentioned the joke, though, as a setup, because everyone's favorite pick in this draft, I know, was Dorian Williams, linebacker from Tulane. A pick that everybody saw coming, that everybody wanted, that everybody was super thrilled with when the Bills made it. No, I'll stop joking. So it came to Dorian Williams, round 3 pick number 91 for the Buffalo Bills. I didn't love this pick when it happened. Again, I wanted depth at right tackle and or competition for Spencer Brown. So I wanted Wanya Morris, who went literally the very next pick to the Kansas City Chiefs at 92, right tackle from Oklahoma, Wanya Morris. I wanted him. I also would have been very cool with Siaki Ika, defensive tackle from Baylor, who went 7 picks later at 98 to the Cleveland Browns. I do feel a little better though, with the signing of Poona Ford today, which makes it feel a little better. And a little bit of DJ Dale, the undrafted free agent from Alabama, which I'm going to talk about for a little bit. This is good from Joe. Goatians. So he took Dorian Williams and just put GOAT in it because he's going to be the best. I like where your head is at. Billy Williams says Williams is a great last name. I feel like you're kind of biased. Maybe. Just a little bit potentially, but I like where your head's at. Oh, Morning Mind with very legitimate positivity. She says, I adore him with 3 exclamation points. Though so thrilled he's going to be a star. I think you mean Dorian Williams. Maybe not. But yeah, this is a pick. Again, I didn't love it when it happened. Not necessarily because of the player itself, but just because of what else was on the board. I wanted offensive line. I wanted interior defensive line. Again, I feel a little bit better now with the Poona Ford signing, and even a little bit with DJ Dale, who I'm going to talk about in the back end of this episode. But I wanted Wanya Morris. I wanted some right tackle. I wanted some offensive line help there. It didn't happen. They took a linebacker who, for me, has not development or timeline concerns, but has a bit of a later development. Like, I don't think he is a player who is going to come in and, he's going to be a starter in 2023. And Brandon Beane kind of said as much and then walked it back a little bit. But let's talk about Dorian Williams from a skill set perspective. So first thing, when we talk about the pass coverage piece, so he is a fast player. Let me pull up I really should have my measurables time from a better perspective in terms of where my notes are at. I'm pretty sure he runs a 4.49 40 time, and I'm correct. He does run a 4.49. So fast linebacker, rangy, athletic, ran a 4.49 in the 40. You see that on tape. You see the athleticism. You see the range. You see the speed, both the long speed and the burst. You see that. I've heard him talked a lot about in coverage by Bills fans who either watched highlights. In coverage, the biggest piece with him, and I'm going to bring up a quote from Brandon Beane in a bit to kind of drive it home further. The biggest thing with his coverage at Tulane is his coverage wasn't necessarily bad, but it was very simple. It was very simplistic. A lot of his coverage responsibilities were basic spot drop zone coverages where he was dropping to a landmark and dropping to a spot more than he was reading what was going on. And most of the time he was just dropping to the hook curls or he was dropping to the flats in cover 3. So it was more basic or simplistic zone coverage responsibility. You would see him man up against tight ends or running backs. So he has that man mirror ability versus tight ends and running backs. You also see him line up at edge a little bit. You will see him rush off the edge. You'll see him run some stunts and loop a little bit or blitz from the second level. He doesn't have pass rush moves or pass rush plan. He's mainly just a speed to power guy or a guy who's trying to get around the arc. My concerns with him, I do think he struggles at times to shed blocks or slipping blocks or getting off them early enough or efficiently, especially with his arm length, which is a big, big, big plus piece for him. His arm length comes in at, 33 3/4 inch arms, which is ridiculous, legitimately for a linebacker that's kind of close to like the 100 percentile if you're looking at an inside linebacker spot, outside linebacker spot, which kind of includes edges at times. It's still like in the 80th, 85th percentile. So with his long arms and his athleticism and his speed, I would like to see him shed blocks better, or at least stay clean more, or slip blocks. Not everybody's going to be a stack and shed guy, even with his long arms. So you don't have to have an offensive lineman come into the second level and you stack them and read and shed. But you will see him slip blocks from time to time. When I say slip blocks, I literally mean like he just kind of like dips underneath and avoids the block and make a play. That and stacking and shedding doesn't happen the majority of the time. He'll get, occupied. He'll let guys get into his body. He'll get driven 5, 6, 7 yards downfield. I want to see him lean more into his athleticism, his speed, his burst, his quick trigger. I want to see more of that from him and just really get him to lean into that explosion and that athleticism, whether in close quarters or out in space. I do think he can get lost in coverage at times. His eyes will mislead him. He'll kind of go with whatever he's seeing in front of him instead of, again, reading out the route distribution where he's dropping and kind of reading and aware as to what's happening. I think that can get better with NFL coaching and coaching up his processing a bit, because right now his processing overall in the pass and against the run is a bit slow. He's slower with his processing and his diagnosing. Now, that's kind of mitigated a bit because he does have burst and speed. He can be a bit slow to process or be a bit slow to diagnose because he has the speed to get there. It's similar to, a quarterback with a really strong arm. Like, he doesn't necessarily have to throw with tremendous anticipation. He can be late to a throw a little bit because he's got a rocket for an arm and he can fit the throw in regardless. That's a little bit what Dorian Williams has going on. But overall, I was, again, a little frustrated with the pick initially, but I've come around more to it. Just not necessarily because I watched more tape, but I just kind of circled back and came through. And I think a lot of it for me is going to tie into what version of the Bills defense we see. I don't think the linebacker role, that middle linebacker role that we've seen Tremaine Edmunds occupy, I don't think that role is going to have the same responsibilities in 2023. Not just because Tremaine Edmunds isn't there, but I think with Sean McDermott being the trigger man for that defense, I think you're going to see more multiplicity, more of an attack-minded, gap-shooting, disguised front, who's coming from where, who's got what responsibility, what the hell's going on, more of that from the defense. And so maybe you don't need a linebacker like Tremaine Edmunds who can match slot receivers and tight ends and carry them vertically downfield. I did see 2 reps of that from Dorian Williams, and it wasn't terrible. Again, he's got the speed and athleticism to carry guys downfield. I think if he gets better with his processing and his diagnosing, he has the potential to match and carry guys vertically or be that wall defender. His ball skills do need to improve a little bit at the catch point, both in terms of him turning and locating the football and then making an actual play on the football. But he's got a lot of traits and tools that you like. Again, the speed, the range, the arm length. It's nice to see. He's got to get better shedding blocks or slipping blocks in the box. He needs to get better with his processing. And the defense that he came from, again, wasn't the most complicated. It was more simple compared to what the Bills had. Again, most of his coverage reps at Tulane were basic spot drop zone into the hook curls or flats or man responsibilities versus tight ends and running backs, which speaks to Brandon Beane's initial comments about him, which I'm going to read in a minute. He had a few reps where he matched tight ends in zone vertically and carried them downfield, which is most likely what he'll have to do more of in Buffalo. How he adjusts to pro coverages, both in terms of responsibility and awareness and processing, along with regularly shedding and or slipping blocks and processing versus the run, will be his biggest adjustments. His speed, range, burst, and good arm length give him some fun tools to work with. So while he does need development, he's not completely unarmed in the fight. What was interesting is Brandon Beane had some quotes on him, especially the day of Dorian Williams being picked. And Brandon Beane's initial quote on Dorian Williams was, quote, "We'll start him outside and we'll see. We try to make these guys somewhat interchangeable. This is going to be a much more complex system. Some of these guys come from a more complex system. I would say this is a simpler system that he's coming from, just what we know about him in the time that we spent with him. Mentally, it will take him from a football foundation a little bit more in our defense. It's not as complex, talking about where he's coming from at Tulane. It's not as complex as what he's going to have here. So we'll start him at a spot. Not going to say he could never be a dual guy. I would think year one, we wouldn't do much of a duel with him. Now, Brandon Beane backtracked a little bit the following day. The quotes are kind of all over the place in terms of what he said initially and then what he said the second day. I also think what he said initially makes a lot of sense. It's smart to undersell on any rookie, especially one that's filling an important role or a high profile role like he potentially could be in filling in for Tremaine Edmunds, who left to become one of the highest paid linebackers in NFL history. Also, when Dorian Williams was interviewed, Dorian Williams said Sean McDermott told him that he was going to learn both the Mike and the Will. Also of note from Brandon Beane on that day 3 piece. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself for a minute. So again, Beane initially said, we're going to start him outside, meaning not at Mike. They want guys to be interchangeable. They want their linebackers to know both. But because he was coming from more of a simpler system, he didn't think he'd be much of a dual responsibility guy in year one. Backed off that a little bit, I think, because he started to see some of the backlash or comments or uproar of fans saying like, oh, another developmental guy and special teams guy, what the hell, blah, blah, blah. Can't play in the middle. Why do we take him? Blah, 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 all that. And then Dorian Williams saying Sean McDermott told him to learn Mike and Will. I think he's a developmental Mike. I don't think he's going to be the Mike in 2023. He could be. Would I be completely shocked if he won out and was the starter alongside Matt Milano in 2023? Not necessarily. I think if he is, it's because the defense is undergoing more of a schematic or philosophical shift. I think long-term, he could be a starter. I think Dorian Williams' timeline, and I don't know how frustrated this is going to make fans, I don't think his timeline is as 2023 based as it is for Dalton Kincaid and even Osiris Torrence. I think the Dorian Williams pick is more for 2024 and beyond. Or again, unless they're kind of tweaking some things philosophically or schematically from a defensive standpoint. The dude is up. There's a good comment here from C. Rose, and somebody else said it earlier. Too many comments coming in. C. Rose says, Dorian Williams was a captain in college. He has a great attitude, and I think he will show people what he brings to the table. He's going to work hard. I forget who said it earlier too. I think maybe Morning Mayan said it, that he was a captain. Yeah, he's a leader. The Bills love these culture guys, and he is a culture guy, team leader, captain, guy who sets the tone. So we'll see. And the biggest variable for all of it with the linebacker position and the defense as a whole really is going to be what type of schematic shift or tweak or adjustment do we see? If we start to see more of Sean McDermott's Carolina defense, I think anybody could start at linebacker. I think it could be Dorian Williams. I think it could be Terrell Bernard. I think it could be AJ Klein. Maybe, Tyrell Dodson or Balin Spector has a shot at it. My initial thoughts before they picked Dorian Williams was, and even though I don't like this approach because I don't like siloed roles, my initial thought was AJ Klein would be the, early down Mike or linebacker, and then Taylor Rapp would be the dime linebacker. That's a huge variable too. I think Taylor Rapp is going to be the third down or passing down linebacker with Matt Milano and or the backup nickel. I've been saying that for maybe a month now. Taylor Rapp's a proven dude. I know he came here on a small contract and maybe the market wasn't great for him. I just don't see him coming to the Bills without the opportunity to play a decent amount of snaps or have some defined role, or maybe some kind of, hey, we want to keep you around here because maybe Micah Hyde's not coming back and maybe you're going to be the starter next year or some kind of something. But from a 2023 standpoint, I think Taylor Rapp is going to have a role on this team, and knock on wood, barring injury, it's not going to be at safety. He played dime linebacker in the Super Bowl and nickel in the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals, and he worked out pretty well at that spot. I think it fits given how the Bills linebackers look right now. So that's another, wrench to kind of throw into the mix. Who are you taking off the field on third down? It's not going to be Taron Johnson. It's not going to be Matt Milano. It's not going to be Hyde or Poyer. It's going to be whoever that other linebacker is. So I think that throws into a wrench. That throws a wrench into the process a little bit in terms of Dorian Williams' timeline. And then you have to match him up with what does year two Terrell Bernard look like? This is a guy who came highly recommended from Dave Aranda at Baylor, one of the most respected defensive minds in football and somebody who Sean McDermott has a real affinity for. Bernard has the coverage chops in terms of the match coverage capability. Terrell Bernard's also a very good blitzer, a very good heat-seeking missile coming forward who fits kind of more of that Carolina attack-minded mode. Maybe he's getting overlooked and underestimated a little bit. We'll see what year 2 Terrell Bernard looks like. I'm not banking on Dorian Williams starting in 2023. I don't think his timeline is necessarily 2023 focused. I think he's more developmental, which again, I think people don't love because you want reinforcements for 2023. Everybody's in win now mode. Everybody wants to get better now and attack now and win now. Long term, I think this could be a really good pick. I'm still not the highest on it right now. How I feel about it, and I said this with Greg, and I've said it on Twitter and a couple shows, how excited or how good I feel about this pick won't just be tied to how Dorian Williams does. It'll be tied to how, the other guys I wanted at that spot do. If Wanya Morris turns out to be an awesome right tackle for the Chiefs, I'm going to be pissed. If Siaki Ika turns out to be a sweet interior defender for the Cleveland Browns, I'm going to be pissed. Also, what's interesting, Brandon Beane said when he talked about the Dorian Williams pick, he said, quote, "It was getting close to where it could have been offense too, but offense was taken a certain number of picks before, and I don't remember, but by the time it was on the clock, he was the highest guy on the board." So Brandon Beane said that they were getting close at that pick 91, where it could have been an offensive player that they went with instead of Dorian Williams. What's interesting to note, kind of like a fun fact, there were only 3 offensive players taken in the 10 picks before the Bills took Dorian Williams at 91. Running back Tajay Spears at 81, running back Devin Achane at pick 84, running back Tank Bigsby at pick 88. Also, UNC wide receiver Josh Downs was taken at 79, and tight end Tucker Kraft was taken at 78. I don't know if they would have double dipped at tight end. I don't know if they would have double dipped in the offensive weaponry standpoint and gone with Josh Downs. Maybe they wanted one of those running backs, but those were the only 5 offensive players taken in the 12 picks before Dorian Williams went. And then the players at 77 and 76 before Tucker Kraft were also defense. There was more defense in the 70s. So I thought that was again, that's not completely Dorian Williams related, but I thought it was an interesting nugget where Beane said like it was getting close at 91 to where it could have been an offensive player taken too. But again, he started to like say it a certain number of picks before. It was like he was going to say the guy or guys we wanted got taken, but then he backed off and was like, "Oh, I don't remember." But by the time we got to 91, Dorian Williams was the highest guy. Maybe the Bills would have taken another running back. Maybe it was going to be Josh Downs. Maybe it was Tucker Kraft, but it seemed like it was going to be one of those 5 guys with running back coming closer to the actual Bills pick, which I thought is very interesting. Taylor says, Beane said Williams is exactly what we want at linebacker. So there's that. That's fair, but I also don't like Beane's not going to come out and say the opposite. Like he's not going to come out and be like, he doesn't fit anything we like. He doesn't fit anything we do. He's the wrong archetype or the wrong mindset or the wrong athleticism. Like he's not going to say that. Similar with usually when GMs come to the podium and they're like, "Oh, you picked Timmy in round 1. How do you feel?" It's like, "Oh, Timmy was the guy we wanted. We're pumped." For all we know, there were 2 other guys that they wanted, and those 2 guys got taken, and they got stuck with Timmy. So I think it's fair that Beane said that, but Beane also, again, like I read, like Beane had some interesting comments the first day and then kind of walked him back a little bit and said some other things. So I don't know if he was trying to do damage control or kind of course correct for some things, or that's really how he feels. But even with that, of him saying Williams is exactly what we want at linebacker, very well may be true, but I just don't see him saying the opposite. So I don't put too much stock in, him saying that. AK Cash, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for another comment. You've been commenting a lot this episode. I appreciate you. And thank you very much for the super chat. AK Cash says maybe Milano's role in dime is the most important and they want insurance for that. It could be. Maybe they want Milano insurance. Milano's a physical guy. He's an intense, quick trigger kind of guy. So I don't think it hurts to have insurance from Matt Milano. That's also actually a good piece too that I don't think it's talked about enough, right? Like Matt Milano is going to be hugely important to this Bills defense. He needs to stay healthy. They need to protect him. But if he does go down, again, knock on wood and God forbid, you have somebody like a Terrell Bernard or maybe a Dorian Williams who can replace him, and you have different tools and skill sets and traits that you can lean into as you try to kind of mitigate a loss like that. So, I mean, Matt Milano, regardless, whether it's in dime or any personnel, package, group, whatever, he's going to be tremendously important to this Bills defense this year. Dude was an all-pro last year. He's going to be super, super, super super, super important to this Bills defense. So we'll see. Yeah, again, overall, Dorian Williams has some fun traits to lean into. Like most third round picks, they usually have to be coached up in some way, shape, or form. The biggest things for me are, how he adjusts to pro coverages, match coverages, more reading and recognizing, more coverages where he has to read route distributions and process on the fly instead of just, I'm dropping to my landmark spot no matter what. Let me just backpedal and look at the quarterback and then kind of see what I got going on. How does he adjust to more complex systems? Again, stuff that Brandon Beane said. He comes from a simpler system. The Bill system is more complex. They're going to have to see how he adjusts to that. So that's the big one for me, how he adjusts and picks up more pro-style NFL coverages and more complex coverage systems and schemes. And then also how he improves his block shedding and or block slipping. Again, it doesn't have to just be stacking and shedding, getting physical. It can be, Fred Warner does this all the time. You'll see Fred Warner kind of juke offensive linemen or beat them to a spot by slipping underneath them or getting around them and kind of fitting in the hole that way. So how does he adjust in that way and improve? I do think that area needs improvement. His ability to just get off blocks efficiently or quickly, ability to kind of stay clean in the box and in the interior. So we'll see what happens. But overall, I think, going to that well at linebacker again, back-to-back years, with some sort of positional redundancy when other positional needs or higher ranked players perceived higher ranked players may have been on the board. I get that understanding from a frustration standpoint and understand that. And I share some of those sentiments, but Williams has some fun traits and some cool skill set pieces. I still don't love this pick. We'll see what happens. Again, I'm holding out hope. I think, the Bills have, and Sean McDermott has a strong track record of developing linebackers and kind of leaning in to those skill set pieces. And again, I think with a certain philosophical change or schematic shift defensively, that could potentially open up Williams' opportunity to see some snaps and improve and get better and kind of be more in a system that's tailored to his skill set. So we'll see. I think this one is I understand both sides. If you hate this pick, I get it. If you love this pick and you want to buy the stocks and send it to the moon, I get that as well. For me, I still don't love it. I question kind of the positional need and value given what else was on the board positionally and player-wise. I don't hate the player. I don't love the player. I don't love the pick. I'm very meh overall. I can see the upside, though, and I can see the long-term plan. We'll just see if he hits it or not. Again, at the end of the day, you could do worse than getting a really fast, rangy, athletic, twitched-up linebacker with long arms. Like, you could do worse than that. So we'll see what happens. Now, let's move on to the day 3 guys. Justin Shorter, wide receiver from Florida. Nick Broeker, guard from Ole Miss. And Alex Austin, cornerback from Ohio State. Oregon State, I should say. Those are your day 3 picks. We're going to run through those now. Shorter, I think, is real interesting. Just the dynamic that he brings to this Bills offense from a height plus weight plus speed standpoint. So 6'4", 229 pounds, runs a 4.55. Now you may see that and be like, well, he only runs a 4.55. That's not very fast. Yeah, but at 6'4" with long legs, like that is fast. He's got X receiver potential and he adds a dynamic. Bean also mentioned it today or the day before. I don't remember. That again, he adds a dynamic to the room that they didn't currently have. The Bills don't have a lot of size at wide receiver. You have Gabe Davis, but other than Gabe Davis, the receivers are Stephon Diggs and Deontay Hardy, and you got Trent Sherfield, who's about 6'1", but he's not necessarily one of the core wide receivers on this team. He's a player on a 1-year deal. You've got Khalil Shakir, who's on the smaller side. You don't really have these bigger bodied, size, frame, ball winners, physical at the top of the route guys like Justin Shorter. He's more of a vertical route guy, literally like nines, vertical routes, posts, post corners and, blaze outs and, hooks and hitches. But he's the guy who, again, runs a 4.55, and because of his size and his gait, he can get downfield in a hurry. He can beat guys straight line downfield. And because of the size and frame, if you want to get physical with him, I posted a clip of it a couple days ago. I think against Tennessee, maybe. Yeah, Tennessee, where the corner just kind of gets physical with him in the stem. Shorter runs like a 9-yard hitch, and he gets to the top of route and literally just like chucks the receiver off him, turns, catches the ball, turns upfield, breaks a tackle, kind of carries 2 guys for a couple more yards. Again, it's a dynamic the Bills don't have. The Bills don't have a ton of size. And not only does he have size at 6'4", he's 229 pounds. He's a big dude, and he runs fast at a 4.55. He's also going to be a good special teams guy. He's a high character guy. Brandon Beane talked about him being a guy that could earn a jersey, being a 4-phase special teams guy. So we'll see what happens for him. And for a wide receiver group that, I think Gabe Davis gets resigned, but I don't know, maybe Gabe Davis balls out this year, and the wide receiver market can be fickle. I mean, we saw it come back to earth a little bit this offseason with Jacoby Myers and Juju, but I mean, last year with what Christian Kirk and Zay Jones got was wild. So for all we know, Gabe Davis could price himself out of Buffalo this offseason. Maybe Justin Shorter gives you some Gabe Davis insurance with the type of routes that he runs currently, and plus the size and frame and speed. Get him into the system a year early, coach him up, expand his route tree, expand some of the technical pieces of his game. I do think, I don't think he's ever going to be the most sudden or decisive route runner just because he is taller, bigger, and long-legged. I don't think his frame lends itself to being, a sharp cutter or a person who'd only can go full speed and just 2 steps and pop out. I don't think he's ever going to be running routes like Garrett Wilson or something like that. But again, you can do different pieces with him. And I do like the upside. Again, similar to the Dorian Williams pick, you could do a lot worse at wide receiver than taking a tall, big, fast, physical wide receiver. And then if you believe in your team to kind of coach him up and improve the technical aspects, you could have something on your hands. I'm excited to see him in camp and in the preseason, just see with that physicality. Again, he's got some X potential, and he's got the speed, size, frame. Will be very interesting. Nick Broeker, guard from Ole Miss. He was primarily a left tackle at Ole Miss the past couple of years until he was moved to left guard this past season. He doesn't have the arm length or the athleticism to be a tackle really in college, but especially at the NFL. But it's nice to have someone on the team who has that versatility and that experience. He plays with intelligence. He plays with technique. He had better foot speed and movement than I thought he would. I don't think he's the most athletic and the most fleet of foot, but he moved better than I thought he would on tape. He stays centered on contact. He's technical. He's smart. He's responsible. He's got some people movement ability to him. He's got the ability to get under guys and drive a little bit. Overall, he's not the most powerful. He's not the most athletic. He's not some physical marvel in size, frame, strength, speed, athleticism, but he's smart. He's heady. He's experienced. He's technical. I'm interested to see what happens with him, especially because they added him again to a guard group that now has Connor McGovern, Ryan Bates, David Edwards, Osiris Torrence, and Ike Butker. And there were also rumors that Tommy Doyle was going to move to guard before the draft. So it's interesting to see where he fits. If he's just a practice squad guy, maybe he has a chance to beat somebody out for depth. I do think it's going to be tough for him to crack the final roster, given what's ahead of him. Again, McGovern, Bates, David Edwards, Torrence, Butker. Those are 5 guys that I do think would be hard for him to beat out, but you never know. Again, smart, technical, very experienced. You could do a lot worse than that, especially where they got him very late on day 3. And then Alex Austin, cornerback from Oregon State. I haven't fully watched his tape yet. I went to get to it, and I went down some other rabbit holes, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I said this on the Immediate Reaction show with Greg. I'm just going to say it again now. I trust Sean McDermott with late round DBs, so I'm encouraged and interested anytime the Bills take a late round DB. I mean, again, even if you don't have the highest view of a lot of the guys I'm about to name, the fact that they took a 7th round corner in Dane Jackson and made him a corner 3 or a low end 2 is a success. The fact that they took an undrafted free agent in Levi Wallace and made him a low end corner 2 to the point that he got a free agent deal and started on another team with the Steelers is a success. They took a 4th round corner in Taron Johnson and turned him into one of the best slot corners in the entire NFL. They took Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, who were kind of afterthoughts in free agency, and turned them both into all-pro safeties. They took DeMar Hamlin from the 6th round and made him, a number 3 safety, potentially number 2 safety. They've had success with late day 3 DBs, late round DBs, undrafted DBs. So anytime they take one, I'm interested and encouraged. Jeffrey says the Austin pick is the sleeper. In 2 years, he's starting. Cosell loved him. We'll see. Again, even I also forgot Christian Benford, who was a 6th-round pick last year, who may be moving to safety. We'll see what happens there. I liked Christian Benford last year more than I liked Kyrie Elam. And I don't even think that's a knock against Kyrie Elam. I think that's a feather in the cap to Benford and a feather in the cap to the coaching staff that they took a 6th-round corner from Villanova and turned him into starting caliber in one offseason, to the point that he was holding his own against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and those dudes in Miami before he got hurt. He was the starter early on in that year, week 1, week 2, week 3. So just Sean McDermott has a golden touch, it seems, knock on wood, when it comes to DBs in Buffalo. He had a similar touch in Carolina, similar touch in Philadelphia. We'll continue to see what happens for him. Another one I wanted to talk about, I posted a bunch of clips of his on Twitter. DJ Dale, the defensive tackle from Alabama, 6'1", 302 pounds. He was an undrafted free agent signing by the Bills on Saturday night once the draft ended. I'm only a couple games in. I want to watch more, but I'm encouraged so far, especially for an undrafted free agent. He makes life hard on offensive linemen. He gums up the works. He can 2-gap effectively, but he can also give you some penetration. He can sink and hold at the point of attack versus double teams. I think in the NFL, he's either, you're going to look for him to be on the interior, whether it's a 1-tech or him playing on, a center shade or a 0-tech. He's very limited in terms of pass rush moves. He does have a quick arm over, a push pull, and he can, drive through and rip on like a run stunt or a slant or a spike. He's got enough agility for run stunts and, rip throughs, but he's not the most fleet of foot. He's not an athletic marvel. I don't think he's overly strong. He just grinds and he leans on guys and he makes life tough for offensive linemen. And similar to what I said for Shorter and similar to what I said for Dorian Williams, I think you could do worse than getting a defensive lineman from Alabama as an undrafted free agent at a position grouping that you need more help on the interior defensive line for the Buffalo Bills. I am very excited about the Poona Ford pick. I'm going to be diving into his tape, I think, tonight after I finish this episode and post it and everything, with prepping for the episode. And I had some other things tonight going on in the real world that kind of prevented me from diving into the tape, but I will be posting Poona Ford clips and some breakdowns on the old Twitter machine, maybe something on YouTube going forward in the next couple of days. I am encouraged for the interior defensive line between Dale and Poona Ford. I still think Dale's going to have an uphill battle. Can he beat out Brandon Bryan and Ilianku? Ford, as Pop says, Ford is a great pickup. He really is. Again, I don't dislike Jordan Phillips. I just don't think Jordan Phillips can play a full 17-game season. And then Tim Settle, whether it was because of injury or not, he really fizzled and disappeared down the stretch last year. And I just didn't think there was any way you could go into the regular season with your top 4 defensive tackles being Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, and Tim Settle. I think Poona Ford slots in as a pretty reliable number 3, just based off of my initial thoughts and some pieces from different people. One piece I wanted to bring up, I reached out to his Twitter handle is at @CMikeSpinMove. He's a dude who does a lot of work for the Seahawks. I forget the name of his Seahawks podcast, but he does a lot of good work and knows the X's and O's of football. I asked him about Ford just to get some early, return on some analysis. And he said he can really play anything in base. And he has, to be honest. In a 4-3, he can play 1-tech or 3-tech. He's played a 2-gapping, 0-tech, and bear fronts as well. I asked him kind of, how he would fit in nickel defense with light boxes like the Bills run. And he said hopefully he's playing a 1-gap, power step, 1-tech, or a 3-tech, instead of being like a quasi 2-gapping, 2Y or a heavy 3-tech. The latter is something that Seattle switched up on him this past year, in contrast to 2021 when he was fine plus. So he said, more penetrative and let him get into the initial blocker more aggressively, which fits into the Bills' identity. We know they're a 1-gap penetrating front. We'll see what he can offer. It's a nice piece. He's got some size. He's got some speed, got some athleticism. Again, I am going to be diving into the tape and posting a bunch on Twitter. So if you don't already, follow me on Twitter at @pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. I'm not just saying it as a plug for the Twitter, but I'm still going to be breaking down those pieces. Pop says, what other free agent player would you still like to see the Bills sign? I'm going to go at edge. And I'm going to say, give me Justin Houston, give me Yannick Ngakoue, give me Matt Ioannidis, although he's more on the interior, but I would still take some interior help. Give me a proven edge rusher. I love what Justin Houston brings from an athleticism, physicality standpoint, and a leadership standpoint. I'd also take Melvin Ingram, who's given the Bills problems the past couple of years in Miami and Kansas City. I need another proven edge rusher. I think Von Miller misses the start of the season and doesn't really play until October or November, which means Greg Rousseau needs a dance partner because I don't think AJ Epinesa is built to be an edge 2, and I don't think Boogie Basham is built to be an edge 3. And even when Von Miller comes back, I don't think Boogie Basham should be on the game day roster. So I think you need another edge. Give me a veteran presence. Give me somebody who knows pass rush plan and technique and moves, who has a proven track record in the NFL. I also, if there was some way they could get Jerry Hughes back, I'd take him. But I think that's a conversation for another time, potentially. We're going to start to wind down here on this episode. I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks. But before you folks start to dip, as we start to wind down here, please, and thank you. If you haven't already, please drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. I know I say that every week, but it's because I sincerely mean it. And I think that verbiage rings pretty true because I'm telling the truth, and that's exactly what it is. So if you haven't already, please drop a like on this video if you enjoyed this content, if you'd be so kind. Please subscribe to Disguise Coverage here on YouTube. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. Please rate and review and subscribe, whether on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Ratings and reviews go a long way. Whether you just want to go in there and drop a 5-star review, or if you want to give me actual feedback, positive or constructive, I appreciate all of it in any way, shape, or form. Thank you to everybody who rode with me live here on this episode of Disguise Coverage. I say it all the time. Every time I do the solo shows and I don't have a guest on, it's so much better when there's a bunch of live viewers. It makes me feel like I'm not doing the show alone, and it's awesome to see the comment ticker continuously move and to see the back and forth engagement with each other, the engagement with myself, the questions, the thoughts, the comments, the overall discussion. I say it all the time. Like, I feel like I could come into an episode when the chat is really jumping and not have anything planned and just read comments from the chat and, go off of the resulting organic discussion that results from the chat. So everybody who joined me live, thank you very much tonight. It goes a long way. Thank you very much to Sophia. Thank you very much to DF Forever. Thank you very much to AK Cash for your super chats tonight. I greatly appreciate you folks. I don't think I missed anyone else. If I did, I apologize. Thank you to everybody for just joining me live and making me not be alone while I did this. So I appreciate you folks. If you if you didn't join me live, that's cool too. Thank you very much for your post-live view, download, listen, whatever have you, whatever form or ounce of support your support comes in or you can provide is greatly appreciated by myself and the entire team. Please tell your family and friends and loved ones about this show and about how awesome it is. If you did not think this show was awesome, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day or night or week with the show, depending on how bad you thought this show was. Thank you to all you folks in a variety of ways. I see some of the positive comments coming through and kind words, so thank you very much for that. For those of you who didn't, or whose questions I didn't get to or comments I didn't get to, I apologize. Leave them on the YouTube page, on the comments page. I will circle back and answer them on the YouTube page in the comments if you want to do that. So I'll post the episode will be posted as soon as I click end broadcast here. Go to the comments, ask your question or post your comment, thought, question, concern, whatever you got. I'll answer it there. Or if you have me on Twitter, put me or follow me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Tweet at me, DM me, whatever you got. I always, it's super cool to have this platform and to have people that appreciate me or my work in whatever way that you appreciate me or my work. So I try to make sure I answer anything and everything that comes my way because I'm tremendously grateful for you folks coming through. And I see some more kind words. So thank you very much for the kind words as well. I don't like to pull them up because I think it's corny, but I notice them and they sincerely mean a lot to me. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. The draft is over. Time to wind down a little bit and get ready for rookie mini camp. And then OTAs will be around the corner and then training camp and preseason. And I'll have you covered here every single Tuesday night live at 9 p.m. here on Disguise Coverage. Myself and Eric Turner will be live in the Cover One Film Room tomorrow night at 7 p.m. breaking down film of the new Bills draft picks. I was going to do some film tonight, but we're going to be putting the film for everybody into tomorrow's episode. So that'll be there. I'll see you folks all next week, live Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.